is accustomed to start the Su'udat Purim learning halachot of Pesach.
Oh, that's right.
And because the Gemara at the end of Megillah says, the last lines in the Gemara Megillah are that we learn that Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag, we learn Hilchot HaChag, that 30 days before the holiday, we start learning about the laws of the holiday. This is really something specific to Pesach, because Pesach does not just have a lot of halachot that you need to know very, very well going in, but there's a lot of prep for 30 days before Pesach. You got to know what to do. So really, by rights, we should be doing the PACHAD YITZCHAK on Pesach, but we're still dealing with Amalek in current events, and we still have to finish up the last couple paragraphs of the relevant essay that we were doing before Purim about how the nature of Amalek. Okay, so we are in the second ma'amar, the second inyan of the PACHAD YITZCHAK on Purim, and we're just going to finish up. We were talking about how, let's see, we're just going to do, this is not going to be a complete review, but just to get us wet a little bit, I'm going to talk about some of the previous things that we discussed. So the essay starts off, it poses a question. There is an interesting verse in the Megillah that says that Haman, he made a lot. He peeled pur. He cast a pur. And pur is a Persian word for lot. And the pasuk says he cast a pur. Hu hagoral, that which we refer to as a pur is a goral, a lotto. So the verse says, quotes a Persian word for something that it doesn't expect you to understand, and then follows it with an explanation in Hebrew of what it is. What a strange construction for the verse. So that was our diving board. And then we started to discuss the idea that we went back to that verse in the prophecy of Bilam that says, Reshit goyim Amalek v'achrito adei aved, that the first of nations is Amalek, and its ultimate destruction is total annihilation. And we, although we have began to build those fundamental ideas in the first essay, here we discussed that the idea of Reshit means a spiritual root, and that there are two basically spiritual orders, structures of antagonism against Am Yisrael. One is seen as the four kingdoms, and the other is seen as the 7 nations. And each one of these has antagonism towards Israel on one of 2 points. Israel was taken out of Mitzrayim so God could proclaim that their identity now is as servants of God, his personal property. And in Matan Torah, they were empowered with the will of God, the instructions of how to serve God. And ultimately, they were meant to go into Eretz Yisrael and practice. Now, the 4 kingdoms they try to rob Am Yisrael of their identity as servants of God, and the 7 nations try to preclude Am Yisrael from doing that which they were instructed at Har Sinai in Eretz Yisrael. Now we said that the spiritual root of the 4 kingdoms is Mitzrayim, and that was an attempt to preclude Am Yisrael from emerging as servants of God. And the spiritual root of the 7 nations is Amalek, that appeared before Matan Torah, which was an attempt to preclude Am Yisrael from receiving the instructions of how to do the will of God. Okay? And we talked about how that Amalek is, that we talk about this exile as the exile of Rome. And we said this is not because this last stretch of exile started with the kingdom of Rome, but rather we can characterize all of it, even subsequent nations, the 70 nations of wolves that surround us with that one little sheep. So we could say that they are all somehow empowered by Rome, and we described how Rome is hinted at, or Edom is hinted at, in the war of the 4 kings within the 5 kings, with Avram Avinu. So the king, Sid al Melech Goyim, Tid al, the king of the nations, Chazal say is a reference, is the spiritual progenitor of the idea of the Roman Empire, or Edom, the powers of Edom, and that is that he is a king of nations. That means that Edom is able to spread his agenda of poison against the Jews beyond the geographic limitations of his personal kingdom throughout all the kingdoms of the world. So he has this ability to draft and unite all different elements of all different kingdoms and nations under his banner of the destruction of the Jewish people. And that is why we call this name, because even if Rome is not particularly in power where a pocket of Am Yisrael may be today, they suffer from anti-Semitism, which is being fed through the spiritual power of Edom. Okay, that's kind of pretty much the stuff that we discussed until now. Okay, so v'hinei im nevakeshet hatchalata shel Edom b'tor sholachat trunya. Where was the first time that Edom, this quality of Edom that we identified by the War of the Four Kings and the Five Kings of Sida al Melech Goyim, when did it first come into play? Where do you see that the hatred of the Jew that stems from Esav, that's embodied by Edom and Amalek, where did it first use this power to draft other nations and other ethnicities into this irrational hatred? So that would have to be Nimtza. It turns out, Ki hatchala shel hatrunya, the beginning of this decree, of this poisonous call to unite, to fight the Jews, Bisman Malchut Paras. So in the history of the four kingdoms, it was the kingdom of Persia, right? Emptiness and nothingness and darkness on the face of the abyss. Emptiness is Babylon. Nothingness is Persia Media. Darkness is Greece. And on the face of the abyss is Edom. So we're not in, the last one is Edom. And yet we're talking about the second one. And yet the PACHAD YITZCHAK is telling us that that's when this power of Edom, of being able to play through other players, right? That first happened in Paras. Why? Who was the king of Paras? Achashverosh. But who's running the show? Who's determining what Paras does in terms of its policies with its own subjects, the Jews? Haman. So Kol Megillat Esther benuya hi ala trunya shel Amalek shel shalach la'Achashverosh. Achashverosh didn't come up with the idea. Yeah, he's an evil person, he went along with it, but also when Amalek wasn't pushing that agenda, he flipped. So really the problem of Paras, right, in terms of its anti-Semitism, not the unique exile that Paras brings to the table. Remember, each distinct Malchut is its own way of challenging Am Yisrael's identity as Avdei Hashem. Paras was, God was basically forsook you. We're partying with the Kelim of the Beit HaMikdash. You are no longer Avdei Hashem. God relinquished you. That was the branding, that was the marketing of Paras. But in terms of the anti-Semitism and the destruction, the decree, that was the first time that meaning everything after that we take for granted as Jews today, of that fear and that shadow of anti-Semitic genocide that the nations of the world can perpetrate on us without any moral quandary, right? That was already, we know the granddaddy of that, that's the story of Purim. And yet that was Paras. That wasn't Amalek. That was Paras. How did Amalek subvert it all to serve its purpose? Okay? Shehare b'mei Moshe, b'mei Hanevim, in the days of Moshe and the days of the prophets, Amalek be'atzma li'ilachem Yisrael. Amalek presented themselves as the antagonists. They were the enemy, right? The first engagement we had with Amalek was Amalek qua Amalek. It wasn't working through various shadow agents. Virak etz Achashverosh. This is the first time by Achashverosh, Matzina, we find the Rishonet, Edom, which is also Amalek, kishuhu mesitu mediach, he perverts and causes to stray, umachnis letoch Paras, and he places within the kingdom, the agenda of the kingdom of Persia, et hatrunya shelo, his own evil agenda. Ela shemikol makom hayta hasata zu mugbelet rak lemalchut achad shel Paras. The era of the kingdom of Paras determines that the kingdom is Paras. Meaning, as long as the reach of the culture of Paras reached, it was localized within Paras. Amalek is operating within Paras. So Amalek is limited Amalek is not a nation, right? Remember, I'm sorry, Amalek is not a kingdom. He's the root of the nations. He's a nation. So we remember, we talked about there's the exile of nations and there's the exile of kingdoms. When we're the exile of a kingdom, we're certainly not in Eretz Yisrael. We're not even thinking of doing the work that we want to do. Our exile is the challenge of even identifying as servants of God. We could be in Eretz Yisrael wanting to be servants of God, and we still have to plow through the seven nations. The seven nations don't challenge us on the level of Avdei Hashem. So remember, there's this weird, you have to keep in mind in the structure of this, the ideas here that are presented, that you're having two levels of exile transposed on each other. There's the idea of the kingdom and how that affects us, and the idea of the operation of the seven nations, which is a different idea. And here you have where the seven nations is employing the structure of the exile. It doesn't have the ability itself of a malchut, and yet it's operating through. It's able to subvert the malchut to its ends. That's what's happening in the era of Paras, the agenda of Edom through Amalek. Okay, so there it's limited. Va'galut holechet mitameket. And since Persia Media, the exile has continued and gotten deeper. Ad shebegalut harvit, till the fourth galut, which we're in now. Shehi galutenu kayom. Edom kotev trunya l'chol ha'amim. Edom now is the malchut. Now it's not just the nations of the world. Amalek, Edom, meaning Esav is not just operating through Amalek, which is the antagonism of the nations. It's also operating on the level of the malchut. So we have, remember, Edom now is challenging us on the level of Avdei Hashem and on the level of doing the Ratzon Hashem. Okay, Edom, Esav is unique. He was able to affect us both on the level of the spiritual antagonistic forces of nations and the spiritual antagonistic forces of a kingdom, a monarchy, a civilization, a culture. Okay? And now, indeed, we live in an era which it's the malchut of Edom. That's wherever you go. By Paras, it's only if you were within the empire of Paras that Amalek was able to operate. But now that he's on the level of a kingdom, even when you're not in his kingdom, when you're everywhere, it's able to get all the nations on board wherever you are. Okay? And that is Tid al Melech Goyim. Okay. So if you look at this verse that we keep on talking about, the first of the nations is Amalek, and its end will be total obliteration. That you see that the pasuk itself here hints at this special potency, this phenomenon that we're noting about Edom. In the verse itself, Kilomar, that is to say, we said before, Reshit is a code word for this spiritual force, this root. Reshit is not just Amalek, but Reshit is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is also a Reshit, right? So even though they both share in the level of root, Mikol Makom, nevertheless, Hevdel Tahomi Mechalek Beineim, there is a unbridgeable, abysmal gap between the potency of Mitzrayim and the potency of Amalek on the level of root. The Reshit in Mitzrayim, Chalfa Halchala, because the Reshit of Mitzrayim is completely gone. Once Am Yisrael was released from the bondage of Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim disappeared, it's gone forever. There will never be. We are fundamental. I'll put it to you like this. This is super important to know. Chazal always talk about the 49 levels of Tumah. And God was so kind, he was pressured, he didn't have a choice, he had to take us out, because if he didn't take us out then, we'd be lost forever. And yet, nowadays, I assure you that we are way, way past 49. For sure.
How do you get that?
Because I have books written by sages of 200 generations ago that they literally could not imagine Mashiach not coming right away, because they said that humanity could not get worse. And all the signs from Chazal came into being. I have a book like that from the Chavetz. It's very, very depressing when you learn these things. But it's a whole process. You learn other things, whatever, it's fascinating. But the point is that the people that knew the worst Tumah could not have imagined, meaning we have all the Tumah that they always had, and so much more. With technology and everything, we've been able to pervert. I'm telling you, we're so lost from things. I'm telling you, it's quite possible to find somebody on the 49th, 50th, or the 83rd level of Tumah today. Not that there is such a...
But if that's the case, then how do we survive?
That's my point. That's exactly what I'm coming to tell you. This is critical. The point of God taking us out by the 49th level was not because the 49th level is objectively a point of no return. It's that once God took us out of Mitzrayim, we are fundamentally freed. So even now, if we plunge into the 49th level, it has no grip on us because God acquired us. I mean, if God didn't acquire us then, we would have been lost forever. Now it doesn't matter, meaning you're never going back to Mitzrayim. Even if further kingdoms come and subjugate you, it is a localized kind of galus in that era that's meant for a tikkun. We're never going back to Mitzrayim. That was a one-time thing forever. We are fundamentally qualitatively different. We are free. Our neshama is free. Okay? So you could choose to be in the matrix today, but the quality of a Jew means you don't have to. And if you learn the Torah, you could totally be free from Gala today. That's what Torah is. To the degree that you are a function of Torah and you're holding on to that, you are not subjugated. The Mishnah says anybody takes on the yoke of Torah, they take off from him the yoke of the Malchut and the yoke of Derech Eretz. What does that mean? Everybody sits in Kol, they still got to pay tax. They still, that's a scam. You're not going to run away from your the social demands and social obligations and social pressures because you learn Torah. That's not what it means. It means that you are not subjugated spiritually. You are free. It's like the Levium in Mitzrayim. Okay? So the point is that Mitzrayim's gone. What you have is vestiges. The brain is gone. That you have arms and legs that are still running around trying to hold back what Mitzrayim's gone. Till we learn that we're not in Galut, we're going to be in Galut. But it's all, this is what's beautiful also. The character, the personality, the quality of Galut today is only to the degree that it can seduce you. They have no hold over us. We ourselves are the ones that we play Stockholm Syndrome. We play Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is, it was noted, there was a particular case of hostages that started siding with their kidnappers. And it's a psychological term. It means that when you go along with it's to the degree that you believe and then also you start to, there's this sick almost kind of like you start to see your kidnappers as your benefactors, but the point is that our galut is just that. Now in Mitzrayim there's nothing we could have done to get ourselves out. That was the whole point. But fundamentally we are not shaykh to galut because of that. So the problem of our galut is we're going through something that really we and you can as an individual to the degree that you could grasp the Araganuz, you can be beyond it. I'm talking about in terms of the dat, the level of galut of dat that's in exile today. So going back to our point here, Mitzrayim was a one-time thing, and Mitzrayim's gone. Okay, Shani bechinat reshit Amalek. The spiritual root of Amalek is different. The idea of Reshit, which is a spiritual root, means the stage where it manifested before it expressed itself, before the actual 7 nations came, right? When that spiritual antagonistical force presented itself as a complete structure of 7 nations, the root of that was the nation of Amalek and their fight with Am Yisrael. And Mikol Makom Hu Mofia Shuv B'Torat Achron Shel Arba Machlot. You see that which was initiated at the level of root historically, which was before Mount Torah, it boomerangs again and comes back again as the final Malchut. So what you have is that which is embodied in the spiritual root of Amalek. Ends up, it's not just after we deal with Amalek, it comes back and manifests as the last era of Galut on the level of Malchut. It's the same thing. Okay? So he bookends us. The power of Amalek is that he's a Reshit, but he's also an Acharit. He comes at the end. He's the last of the 4 Malchut. So the verse that says Reshit Goyim Amalek, he's the first in terms of nations. And in terms of the Goyim, he's Reshit. The Achrito. But he comes back again, not as a nation, but as a Malchut. Okay? Mikol Makom Hu Mofia Shuv. He appears again, B'Torat Acharon, in another, in the Torah of a last. Meaning he doesn't just appear as the Torah of the first. He's a spiritual idea of first, but he's also a spiritual idea of last. Shel Arba Machlot, of the 4 exiles, of the 4 kingdoms. The Galutenu Kayom, that our current exile today, Galut Edom Hikruya. We call it Galut Edom, like we mentioned. V'lo od, not only that, Ela shebibchinat hareshit, regarding its quality of spiritual root, that it's a spiritual root. Shelo lo haya nimtza ela b'mkomo. That was on the level of spiritual root. That was wherever they happened to be, wherever they were present. Their power was limited to wherever they were. So, as Amalek presented itself, that's where the battle was. V'ilu b'bchinat achrit. That's on the level of reshit. But when they come to you as an achrit, meaning as a reference to the last of the Malchiot, Shelo harehu Tidal Melech Goyim. Then he acts with the power of Tidal, the king of nations. V'hu sholech trun yilchol ha'amim, and he's able to fire out his evil poison through the agency of all other nations. Reshit Goyim Amalek v'achrito, and his end Adei Oved is total destruction. Kolomar, that is to say, Reshit Lishiva, he's the first, the spiritual root of the 7 Amimim. V'acharit, and he's the end, La'arba Malchiot, to the 4 kingdoms who are dedicated to our utter destruction. Okay, so now. Okay, that was an idea that we had been developing and we talked about a lot.
Yeah.
I think we got it. Okay, let's bring it to Purim and this verse of the Pur and the Goral. The Persian word for lotto and the Hebrew word for lottery, right? That's how we start off. V'chachamim darshu, and our sages expounded, Esther min haTorah minayin. So there's this amazing Gemara in Chulin that says, where do you see the spiritual root of Esther and her soul and her story in the Chumash itself? Very fascinating Gemara. I have so much to say about this, but Purim was. But the Gemara asks, there's 4 characters in the saga and the theater of, in the story of Purim, that the Gemara feels it's got to find some sort of spiritual allusion to them in the Chumash. And it's fascinating because 3 of those figures are directly from the Megillah. 1 major character seems to be missing, and the 4th character is somebody who overtly has nothing to do with the Megillah. So it says, Esther min haTorah minayin, Mordechai min haTorah minayin, Haman min haTorah minayin, Moshe min haTorah minayin. So it says, Esther min haTorah minayin, because the verse says in Devarim, on that day, Astir, astir, I will surely hide my face. Yeah. Mordechai min haTorah minayin, because the verse that talks about, one of the verses that talks about the ingredients of the anointing oil that Moshe Rabbeinu had to provide. So the Targum for Mor Doror is Moradachya. It's the root for Mordechai. By the way, I had this whole, I was going to expound on that regarding your father-in-law. This idea that Mordechai's root is in the Targum of one of the ingredients of the Shem HaMishcha. That's a whole yisod. That's a beautiful hint at the whole nature of Purim. The Gemara says, Haman min haTorah minayin, hamin ha'etz. God says, did you eat from the tree that I told you not to eat from? That's the spiritual for Haman. And Moshe, the verse says in Noach, b'shagam hu basar, even though he's all flesh, I'll let him live 120 years. Right? That's when God is talking about his disappointment in the human race. And all these things, the question is, why does Chazal need to find roots for these people? And what do you mean Moshe's root? Moshe is in the Chumash. What does Moshe have anything to do with Purim? So that's for another time. If you guys harp on me, maybe I'll share with you. But it's stuff we all have to know, and it's beautiful and amazing stuff. But all this stuff I can go into beautiful detail and rock your world and probably set you up for a completely different Purim next year, but can't at the moment. The point is that we know that the spiritual root, please just let me know. I don't want to go on Dr. Stefanski's time. So, okay, so Esther, where is the spiritual root for her in the Torah? On that day I will surely hide my face. Astir, astir, I will surely hide, okay? Esther min haTorah minayin shene'emar v'anochi astir astir. Behold, I will surely hide my face. Double hiding. 2 words of hiding. Astir, astir. I will surely hide. V'katav al zeh Ma'aral. And the great saintly Ma'aral wrote on this, shekfelut hastarati. It is a double hiding. It's a double hiding. Achat la'achashverosh. 1 for Achashverosh. V'achat la'Haman. God hid himself twice in the story of Purim. 1 through Achashverosh and 1 through Haman. Those are the cryptic words of the Ma'aral. You would think that the main hiding of God, so to speak, in the story of the Megillah was when you had this terrible decree go out that the Jews were fair game and they were completely to be eradicated and destroyed. And that could only happen because where's God? Where's God? How could such a thing happen? So why is the Maharal saying, you know what those 2 hidings were? What do we care? The hiding was the people? The hiding was the decree. Why is the Maharal saying the double hiding? 1 hiding is Haman, 1 hiding is Mordechai. Is Achashverosh. Ella shehem hem advarim. That's specifically the point. B'gzera zo, in this decree, where Achashverosh took the poison of Haman and set out. He employed the bureaucracy and the resources and the officialness of his kingdom to mete out the agenda, the personal agenda of Haman. That is the first time. So this is the first time that two completely different spiritual arrangements of antagonism to Israel came together and joined forces. You have both the kingdom from the four kingdoms, the exile on the level of kingdom, which is Paras, and you have from the level of Amim, Amalek, from the level of the Zayin Amim, and they're coming together. And there how we see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so involved with the Jewish people. God's ever-present hand-holding and concern and protection and everything that He's involved with us, it seemed to have been hidden. When we are in exile of the nations, that's one level where it's hidden. When you're in the exile of the nations, you don't see how God's involved because it's being obfuscated and obscured by the decrees of that nation. Of that kingdom. And there are times where we're not under the gun of a particular kingdom, of a civilization, but we're being precluded from meting out our relationship with Eretz Yisrael because of the 7 nations that are fighting us. By the story of Esther, there was a hiding within a hiding, which was embodied by the kingdom, which was Achashverosh, and the nations, which is Amalek, which is Haman. Okay? You understand? Is it coming together now? Okay. Okay. U'mekoram shel divrei Maharal halal. Where did the Maharal get this idea? He bepasuk, because the verse says in the Megillah, Vatikatev Esther et kol tokef. Esther wrote the full power of the story. That's what the verse says. What does that mean? She wrote the full power of the story. Upirish Rashi, Tokfo shel nes, the full power of the miracle that was experienced at that time. What is that nes? Nes Haman v'nes Achashverosh. That's what Rashi says. There was a full nes. It wasn't just a nes of one, it was a nes of both Achashverosh and Haman. What is he talking about, the nes of Haman and the nes of Achashverosh? V'lamadnu mizeh, we learned from here, Di'im hayakan ha'esek rakim Achashverosh. If we were only concerned with Achashverosh, ki az lo hayakan el nes bistam. Then there would have been, okay, Achashverosh made a decree, somehow we got around it, that's, okay, a nes. Ukimokein im lo hayakan esek elim Haman, lo hayakan el nes bistam. If you were up against just Amalek, that would have been a nes. Virak achshav. Only now, for the first time historically, that you had these two spiritual forces operating from two different levels, right, coming together, shishtatfu b'gzeira, that they partnered together in this decree. Gam Haman v'gam Achashverosh, yesh lanu kan tokfo shanes. Now you have the extra potency of the nes, because you had the extra potency. You needed a higher nes because of the higher level of decree. Umimakom takfo shel nes, from the power and the potency of this nes, lom dimanu, that we can infer at makom takfo shel hastara. We see how potent before the nes, during the decree, how the exile was. Vehim hem divrei Maharal, and that's his explanation of the Maharal. And now we're just going to finish with this final idea beautifully. Before we said, let us investigate the honey and the milk, the sweetness of the Torah that's under, we say Torah is like honey and milk under your tongue. But we said the word for tongue is also the word for language. And we said, what is the mystery of this language of the Pasuk? Hipil pur, he made a pur, which is a Persian word, hu hagaral, that's what a lotto is in Lashon HaKodesh. What does that mean? Hipil pur hu hagaral lifnei Haman, kelomar, that is to say, ha'oketz shel ha'ma'ora hu bezeh. The stinger in this whole story is this: Shehaman Hamaleki, Haman, who is an Amalek, who is on the level of nations, Asakan Gorel Parsi. He employed, to make his decree, he used the lotto of the Persians. He's playing the Persians. He's employing the spiritual force of the Malchut of Paras to do his bidding. Kikanhu hatchala shel Amalek b'torat shalech trunya. This is where Amalek is acting as Tidal Melech Goyim, as Edom, where he's being able to use other institutions and other bodies, other entities, as for his agency. Tidal Melech Goyim. Tzlav. A tzlav is a crisscross. A tzlav is when you have an erev and a shesi. It means a cross. So he's saying this coming together, but he's making a pun here, and he's saying the cross. He's saying Christianity is essentially that. I don't want to get into that here. That's a minor footnote, but he's alluding to Christianity. He says, Tzlav, this intersection of these two forces, shel amamim u'malchiot, of nations and kingdoms, hastara b'toch hastara, it's a hiddenness within a hiddenness. Umikan, and we learn from here, shetokfa shel nes, the potency of the power of the miracle, hu giloy al gabe giloy. It was a revelation on top of a revelation. Migilat Esther, the revelation of that which is hidden. B'chol haTorah, in all of Torah, medubar rak al simcha u'mishteh. You have examples of simcha, where you should have joy, or mishteh, of rejoicing, of festivity. Rak bePurim, only by Purim, medubar gam al simcha v'gam al mishteh. You have constant references to also joy and also drinking. Gam hasimcha mishameshet dichifa legiloi. When you rejoice, when you have joy, it serves to push out that which is inside, right? It's a hitpashtut. It's a flowing forth of that which is inside. The hayayin, and when it comes to wine, bevadai shu motzi et asod, we know that yayin, it releases the secrets. Ubechein, and therefore, lumat ha'ester b'toch ha'ester, because Purim was a celebration of a nes on top of a nes, because of a hiddenness on top of a hiddenness. Avodat hayom, the whole avoda, the service, the work of the day, hu bigiloi al gab bigiloi, is that there should be a revelation on top of a revelation. Mishteh and simcha. Good Shabbos. Okay, everybody, we should get to party when Amalek is finally achrito adei oved.